Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are going to talk about grouping students. This is taken from Jeremy Hammer's The Practice of English Language Teaching. Okay, let's say different groups. Teachers can group students in the classroom in different ways. Whole class teaching, students on their own, pair work, and group work. And let's talk them one by one. Okay, first we talk about whole class teaching. It is the most common teacher-student interaction in many cultures, and the advantages of whole class teaching are it reinforces a sense of belonging among the group members. It creates an engaging atmosphere. The teacher as a controller, explanation and instructions, a general understanding of students' progress, and whole class working under teacher authority makes students feel secure. And of course, there are also some disadvantages of whole class teaching. The first is it favors the group rather than the individual, and no chance of speaking, embarrassment in front of the mates. It privileges the transmission of knowledge from teacher to students rather than having students discover things. Difficulties in organizing communicative language teaching or task-based sequences. And the second one is students on their own and the advantages of uh, this kind of grouping is teachers can respond to individual students. It can develop learner autonomy and promote skills of self-reliance and investigation, and peace and tranquility rather than noise and chaotic situation. Okay, of course, grouping students on their own also has disadvantages. The first is sense of belonging and cooperation are not encouraged. It means much more thought and materials preparation that whole class teaching involves. It takes more time interacting with individual students than with the whole group. And let's talk about pair work. You usually use pair work. We as teachers usually use pair work in our class, right? And we acknowledge some advantages of pair work, comprising bigger amount of speaking times. Students work and interact independently without the guidance of the teacher, learner independence. The teacher has time to work with all the pairs and promotes a cooperative and friendly atmosphere, and students can share responsibility. And then, of course, grouping pair work uh, to students, also has some disadvantages. The first is pair work is frequently very noisy. Then students often talk about something else, often in their first language. Some students prefer to relate with the teacher rather than with other learners who have the same level of linguistic capability. And the choice of partners can be problematic because there may be students who are not keen on some other students. And then let's talk about group work. The advantages of group work are it increases the amount of talking and personal relationships are less problematic and there are varied opinions. It encourages cooperation and it is more private than work in front of the whole class. Students can choose their level of participation and it promotes learner autonomy. And let's take a look at the disadvantages of group work, guys. The first is It is likely to be noisy, and some teachers feel they lose control, and some students prefer to be the focus of the teacher's attention, and group roles may become fossilized. Groups usually demand more time, and beginning and ending of group work activities can be chaotic. And what about deciding about a grouping? The teachers need to consider a number of factors. The first is the task. The tasks the teacher prepares will influence the grouping, of course. Um, for examples, if you ask the students to try the English, to have a communication in English, of course, your tasks should be directed upon motivating students to use English in a daily conversation. You have materials to encourage them to speak. And the second one is variety in sequence. Different students grouping help to provide variety and thus sustaining motivation. So sometimes students are getting bored because of monotonous activities. So grouping students can be a solution to get rid of boredom of the students. And also the mood, the changing the grouping of a class can be a good way to change its mood. So for example, uh, you can move to large group into pair works. This is sort of making students changing their mood. But if we just have the same group from time to time, I think the students' mood will be down, of course. So it is important to change the mood with different grouping of the students. And now let's talk about organizing pair work and group work and how to make it work. How students feel about working in pair or in groups. This is very important. So as teachers, we can observe what students feel when they have large group work, what students feel when they have pair works. And an important question that is to be asked is what changes of method do we need to make? So if the students are getting bored with the large group, for example, of course we have to change the kind of groupings, maybe we do pair works or something like that. Next, creating pairs and groups, we can decide how to put individual students into pairs or groups according to the first is friendship. Of course, as a teacher in our classrooms, through observation, through our conversation with students, we can see which students get on with which of their classmates. Some students are very close and they prefer to be grouped with their friends, so we have to be aware of it. And the second one, we can also use sociogram. Students are asked to write who they like and who they don't like working with it. Who they like and who they don't like working with. And we can also use trimming according to their ability. For examples, we group students, weaker and stronger students, students at the same level, so that what you think it's helpful for you in teaching them or in the learning process. And the second one is a chance. Students who are sitting next or near to each other, the or will scenario or numbers of letters. Or I usually use this. I often use this. Grouping students based on chance. So I just ask students sitting beside him or her to be her or his groups. And changing groups during the class is very important because if they have just the same friends in their groups, uh, they're going to be bored. They're going to be bored. So it is helpful for you to change their friends in the group. And procedures for pair work and group work. Uh, and before pair work and group work, students need to feel enthusiastic about what they are going to do, and students should understand and agree on what the task is. And the success of pair work tasks is often helped by giving students a time when the activity should finish and then sticking to it. And then during the pair work and um, during our grouping, uh, stand at the front or the side of the class and keep uh, an eye on what is happening. So it is wrong for teachers to just sit down on his or her chair while students are having discussion in their groups. But as teachers, we have to really have the teaching process there by observing students, by uh, examining students' discussion in the classroom. And you need to go around the class watching and listening too. It is very important. And it is also important to intervene, interfere the discussion when we think it is appropriate or necessary, and to pick up information about students' progress. This is some things, or this is things that we have to do during the grouping. And after the grouping, what we have to do? First, we need to organize feedback. So feedback is very important. So don't leave the discussion activity in the group without any feedback. We want to let them discuss what occurred during the group work session and add our own assessments and make corrections when necessary. Constructive feedback can enhance students' future motivation. And what about troubleshooting? How we uh, have to handle the troubleshooting? First, finishing first. Okay. For example, if we find a boredom in the classroom, so we have to initiate or we have to find a solution to the problem, how to uh, get rid of boredom. We can help students, for examples, by like what I have told you before, changing the friends or exchanging friends in the groups. Some students are suffered from demotivation, so we have to be aware of that. We can give them a short little task to complete while they are waiting, for examples. And awkward, students feel awkward. We may need to change the pairs or the groups. That is the solution.